Okay, welcome back to Live from MJSA Expo. It is our last day at MJSA Expo. We're open until 1 p.m. Eastern today. If you're anywhere in the region and you have not been to the show yet this weekend, or you just didn't get to see all the exhibitors you wanted to meet with, you still have time, so head on down here. And don't worry, you could watch this replay later if you decide to jump on the train or in your car right now. MJSA Expo is the only trade show designed exclusively around meeting the needs of people who make jewelry. So the manufacturers, the manufacturing partners, the suppliers, tool supply findings, gems, that's all here. And the people you'll meet here are the people who can talk to you about your jewelry making processes and materials in a really knowledgeable way. So this is a place to find your supply partners and also to learn. Every booth you go to, you'll learn something. So make MJSA the show that you visit every year, because this is the only show that is here for the jewelry maker. And now I would like to welcome my guest, Laura Galvez. She is with the Alliance for, I always say ARM, but I want to get the acronym out. Alliance for Responsible Mining, right?
It is, yeah.
Okay, and Alliance for Responsible Mining also includes Fairmined, and Laura is the Market Development Director for them. And we're going to be talking about Fairmined in general, and also some exciting news from Fairmined that we want to make sure everybody knows about. So welcome.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Yeah, I'm happy to discuss with you and tell everyone about our latest projects.
Excellent. So why don't we just start talking about Fairmined for the person who may not know what Fairmined gold is and how it's different from other gold sources.
Right. So, as you were mentioning, it was created by the Alliance for Responsible Mining. This is an NGO based in Colombia. And over 10 years ago, a group of people from the industry saw that need to transform small-scale mining and the big need for a transformation in the sector, and to make a positive impact in the people who depend on this as a economic activity, and also to transform their society and the way that they live. So they created the Fairmined standard, and this is a standard and a certification for small-scale and artisanal mining. The certified mines that comply with the standard have to follow the rules, and they are very strict guidelines related to the environmental and social impact that they have to generate. And the thing with small-scale mining is that it begins in a very organic way. Usually, years ago, whenever people discover gold deposits, they just started to extract the gold with whatever means they had and however they could. So that meant that they were using, for example, mercury in a very in the way that they could with the tools that they had. So that came with contaminating the water sources, polluting the environment, destroying part of the nature that was there, and also having children being employed and exploited to do these activities. So legalizing and transforming their processes into processes that are respectful with the environment and with the health of the miners is one of the biggest challenges for them. And in this aspect, we do focus on the small-scale mining and artisanal mining because it accounts for the biggest portion of the workforce in the gold industry, in the gold mining industry. Almost 90% of the workforce comes from small-scale mining. But in contrast, it accounts for 20% of the annual production. So we believe that to make a real change, we have to focus on those that really depend on this as a transformative economic activity and a social conductor in the mining organizations and the society and the towns that surround them.
I think a lot of people that are concerned about responsible jewelry get it into their head that, all gold mining has to be bad, and don't realize how many people around the world really only have the mineral wealth in their land to create a society that has education and enough opportunity to, build communities and raise children.
No, definitely. And as an economical activity, nothing is stopping gold mining right now, right? So we should ensure that it's made in the proper way. There is a lot of potential to transform the lives of those that are using this as an activity, and also think about what the alternative is for them. Some of the mining organizations, certified mining organizations we work with are, for example, in Colombia. 3 of them are in Colombia. And what this means in the areas that they are located is what's the alternative for them in regions that are and have historically been surrounded by a lot of conflict and wars. So the alternatives for the gold miners might be a lot worse for society and for their own families and for their towns and for the world in general. So it is definitely something to think of, and
I remember when I first met the first group of Colombian miners that I met, a guy named Roberto, and he said, I don't want my family to have to be part of the cartel world, so mining is what we're going to do, but we want to do it right. And I've met people all around the world now who say the same thing. We want to do it right, but we want to mine our gold. So when you start working with a mine, what kinds of things are you teaching them, advising them to do, instructing them to do so they can get their certification? What are the types of things and problems that you're solving?
So at the Alliance for Responsible Mining, we work throughout the scale of mining organizations that are available. So the first step would be for more artisanal miners to start organizing and legalizing. So just getting a bank account for each individual miner. So, and they have to, each one of them, receive a salary. That's one of the main components of the standard.
Well, and I want you to keep going, but we talk about transparency constantly when we're talking about responsible jewelry. And I don't think people realize just how fundamental that first piece of documentation is, to have a bank account. It starts the legitimization process at the individual level. Anyway, it's not a small thing, it's a big thing. Okay, so go ahead.
And in many cases, it comes with having an ID. That it's a given to think about having an ID for us, but it might not be in some regions and in some countries. It's just not. So that's the first step. Then and the idea is to get closer to the sustainability development goals, right? That this social and economic change that comes with becoming a certified mine by the Fairmined standard gets them closer and closer to it, and they have to develop plans to transform their operation and get closer to the sustainability development goals.
So you're talking about the UN SDGs when you refer to the sustainability development goals, and there are 17?
Yeah.
17, and if you haven't seen the UN SDGs, just go to Google and type UN SDGs, and you'll see these 17 goals for improving the world that you could start implementing at home in your office right now, and they give us a common framework for pursuing environmental and social justice everywhere. Okay, so I just want to make sure that was clear that that's the SDGs that Laura's referring to. Okay, so.
And then the middle step in this pyramid of where the miners are in their organizational development, it would be to comply with the craft code, which is an open source code for mining in general, also created by the Alliance for Responsible Mining. And this is a code, not a standard, so it doesn't get them certified, but we understand that as a pre-certification. So it's also in the way to achieving that sort of development, but in many cases, local regulations or just the shape of the mining organizations won't allow some of the organizations to ever be certified. So this is like the middle step and that very progressive step that organizations can take to be pre-certified, and then they have to comply with, for example, with more progressive measures, such as creating a plan to implement more productive processes, collaborate with the society that is around them, implement processes to reduce the use of harsh chemicals, or in many cases just eliminate completely the use of harsh chemicals such as mercury and cyanide. So these are some of the measurements that they must take, and the Fairmined standard also bases in 4 pillars. The first one that I've talked a lot, I think, is the organizational development, so legalizing the organization. A second one is the social part of it. So this is a male-dominated industry, so they must include women in the important parts of the operation. And in the Fairmined standard, we have several mining organizations that are directed by females, so that's impressive. Another part is that they must comply with health and safety regulations that are local to wherever the mining organization is located. And the fourth one is the environmental protection. So they must be being very respectful of the water sources, making sure that they are not contaminating in any way, and in many cases implementing projects that do reforestation and are bringing back the environment that used to be there, so that the mining activity can be harmonious with the environment.
So when they've exhausted mining source, then they're either reforesting it or returning it to agriculture, some application that's healthy again?
Yes, exactly. So, and that's a really big issue, for example, with the use of mercury. Because, for example, in Colombia, one of our main rivers is called the Cauca River. We cannot eat, or we should not eat, fish that comes from that river, but because it's very polluted by mercury. It's just, and so smaller rivers that come out of it in the area, trying to clean it, trying to bring back what was there. It's a really big challenge, but it's also a challenge that the mining organizations can take upon themselves.
So you mentioned craft code, and I don't think people know enough about craft code, because to me it's very exciting. Like, you know, in the US, in Europe, you know, in areas where we have highly developed and regulated businesses, there's, you know, it's not difficult for a company to be compliant, because the rules are kind of the same for everybody. So then we talk about certifications. So like if you have UL on your electrical equipment, for instance, you know that it was audited by a third-party auditor, and there's all these systems in place to do it. So RJC has put together these, you know, guidelines and certifications for jewelry industry businesses, but those kinds of guidelines are next to impossible to implement out in the field, whether it's in Colombia or Africa or wherever people are mining. So you guys came up with a craft code that brought us this flexible framework for being able to improve mines. And that framework is very adaptable to it's adaptable to the gem world. It's a model that I don't think enough people really, you know, everybody's comfortable with the idea that RJC doesn't apply everywhere, but then they think there's no other answer, and that's not true. There's craft code. So can you talk a bit about craft code?
Yes, so with getting certified, there are of course a lot of barriers and a really big transformation that is required. So craft code is a middle step on that ground, and as I mentioned, it is open source. So it was meant to be and it was created for gold mining, because that's our focus. But we saw the opportunity of it being implemented for any type of mining, any mineral mining, you know, from carbon to gemstones, as you were saying, it could be implemented. And they're using it right now in gemstones, for example. and we promote its use. We do the courses monthly, I believe. And so this is available for all of those organizations that want to seek that change and see really big barriers in getting certified and in complying with more strict programs that are out there. So that's the middle ground that we want to find, and since our focus are mainly the mining organizations and their development, so that's the focus. So what can we provide so that they can have this transition and also be recognized for complying and at each of these transformative steps that they are taking?
The thing I love about Craft Code and your approach to helping these mines professionalize and get safer is that there's this just acceptance of the fact that we don't have to go from 0 to perfect in order to be better. We just need to keep making improvements, and that it's a process.
And in that process, we have to take into account they're not being sponsored, right? A mining organization or a mining collective is not being necessarily sponsored. So in many cases, they are doing all of these efforts on their own, and these come with a high price that they have to pay, a lot of resources and people that they have to employ in order to make any sort of transformation, even the smallest things. So yes, it is very important to take into account the mining organizations are the ones that are putting in the effort in most cases, and so they are the ones that we should think for, and for them we should design the programs.
Very cool. And that's a framework that all of us can really think about. So we've got the SDGs from the UN that are informing all of us around the world that are just trying to make things better one step at a time. And then anyone who wants to do, a project, for instance, directly with a source, there's so many mine-to-market projects going right now. When Laura says that Craft Code is open source, what she's saying is you don't have to pay a license to use it. They want everyone to use it. So then anyone can study Craft Code, learn more about it, and use those principles. And those are frameworks we can all share.
Yes, definitely. It's open for everyone. For those of us at the Alliance for Responsible Mining, we should all go through the course, for example. And if you're interested in standards and understanding, it's also something that you could do just to get informed and see what those middle steps are before getting certified.
Okay, so what's the trickiest problem you have to solve when you're working with a mine to sort of get them in so they could get to a Fairmined standard?
It depends on many things, on the size of the organization, and because we're referring to small-scale mining, this depends on the local regulation. So, for example, in one country, small-scale mining depends on the number of workers that are at that specific mining organization, and they have like a maximum to be considered. In other places, it is the production, the annual production, the monthly production. So it depends a lot on what the local regulation is, and so we have to be also somewhat flexible on that regard, right? Because once a mining organizations, for example, their productivity goes beyond what is considered, they can no longer be Fairmined certified, right?
So they can get too large for it.
They could get too large. That's a possibility. If it's something that works for their productivity, they could just become a medium-sized mining organizations, and that's just not applicable for the standard.
So then they'd have to get to a higher level of a certification at some point.
Yeah, exactly.
Fair enough, but you make it possible for them to have higher standards on the way to that kind of growth.
Yeah, and so since this is very variable, they face different challenges. In some cases, it's the legalizing part of it. In some cases, is the production process, for example, to eliminate the use of mercury in those countries where it is illegal, right? So in some countries it is, in some countries it isn't, so they should use it in a more responsible way, in a way that they are able to reuse it all the time. So it depends. In some cases, they are in conflict situations. So to maintain a workforce that is not involved with those conflict situations, it's a challenge. So it's very unique to every mining organizations, and also because of that, the time that a mining organization, that it takes for a mining organizations to get certified varies from 6 months to 24 or 36 months. It depends a lot on that unique space and the unique way that the mining organization is created. And something else is that the surroundings and the type of mining that they do also varies. So, for example, if you get to go and visit the mining organizations that are in Colombia, you'll find it just what you would imagine to be the tropics. A lot of greenery, a lot of mountains around. But then if you get to go to the Puno region and visit those mining organizations, that's spectacular but very different because it looks like a desert high up in the mountains. So it's going to be a lot of gray, it's going to be very different animals, it's going to be a very different environment. And with that, challenges are also different. And it also varies a lot if it's being extracted from inside the mountain or if it's alluvial mining, it's going to be very, very different.
And ARM has people out in the field working with these mining collaboratives and families and groups, right?
Right. We have people on field, and the idea is that they're following the transformation of these mining organizations and guiding them in the process. And the mining organizations that are certified also have to be audited by a third party. So it's not just ARM, who is also an external party for these mining organizations, but also the auditor that's going to be there. And they are audited annually, and if they do not comply, they can also lose their certification.
Okay, so now we're going to jump. We're going to jump to the gold that's in the market. Now, getting enough gold to the market is the problem we're going to end on because that's a challenge. But let's jump now to somebody is a jewelry manufacturer or studio designer or retailer, and they want to carry Fairmined gold in their store or jewelry, and they want to be able to promote that they are using Fairmined. So who can get a license? What are the requirements for getting a license? And how do people participate?
What we found right now in the market in general as Fairmined is based on traceability. That has been like the strength of the standard so far for the 10 plus years that it's been around. So in order for the mining organizations to comply with the standard and to have those incentives to continue to continue this path of certification, they are rewarded with the premium price, right? So the premium is $4 per gram of gold, and for ecological gold, Fairmined ecological gold, which is the one that uses no harsh chemicals in the extraction process, it's of $6 per gram of gold. So the mining organizations get this premium, and they must have plans in place to use it, to implement projects to improve the productivity of the mining organizations, to improve the conditions, to improve the community they're working with or the lives of the miners that are working there, or implement, for example, the projects that we were talking about the environment and protecting the water sources, for example. So in doing this, we saw that the best way to explain and to put Fairmined out there is to connect the product that you're able to take with the origin and the miner and the faces that are behind it, right?
The stories.
Yeah, and the stories, of course, that are behind it. And so this means providing access to these mining organizations to the international gold market and jewelry market, which is one of the main markets that there are for this type of gold. there are challenges with some other industries. So our main focus in the market has traditionally been the jewelry sector. And so it is important for us to be able to guarantee that they get access to the market so that they have a constant demand, and it's a cost for them to be able to be part of the Fairmined standards so that they can continue to be there and get these incentives.
And I want to talk about that premium for a moment, because you said $4 per gram for Fairmined and $6 premium per gram for Fairmined Ecological, right? And some people are like, that's expensive. Will consumers pay for it? How do I build that into my pricing? My first answer is, if you're selling a $2,000 piece of jewelry, it's really not an issue. It just doesn't make up enough of a difference in the price. You've already got a premium on that price. But Martin DeWitt said something at the Chicago Responsible Jewelry Conference in November. And well, first I'll tell you something Susan Crow tends to say. She says, if you see a $10 t-shirt, you should ask yourself, who suffered to make that t-shirt so you could buy it for only $10? And then Martin DeWitt said something very similar when we were talking about Fairmined premiums, because that argument was going on, it's too expensive, we'll buy it, blah, blah, blah. And Martin DeWitt said, it's time for us to flip the script. That $4 or $6 premium per gram of Fairmined is the actual cost of producing gold. The cheaper gold is what you get to buy when somebody suffered to produce it. The environment, the people, whatever. He said, it's time for us to flip the script and talk about the real price of gold. And I just want to keep putting that out there, because when we think about the problem differently, we find different ways to solve it in our own selling. So.
And I agree completely with you, and we can look at it from a different perspective and see, if I wasn't paying as a designer for that premium, who else is paying it, or where else is being paid? Is it costing the environment? Is it costing the local community? Is it being the cost of it? Is it child labor? So we do have to question it, and also it's called a premium, and we're used to paying premiums in the jewelry sector and in the luxury sector.
It's luxury goods,
yeah,
right?
All over. So sometimes the craft is worth a premium, no? And we're able to, if we're comparing a piece that weighs 3 grams from a brand and another one, we would be willing to pay a premium just for the craft that we know is, and the warranties that are behind a brand and something like this. So it's a lot of meaning, and it's just as luxury is. We have to be selective on where we want to put it, but not just questioning it as a cost, because it's not. It's, as you were saying, it's a fair price at the end of the day.
And a worthy story to tell in the selling of a piece. So I like to just tackle that premium question head on, because it's what we call a red herring, a diversion from the real issue. So, okay, so now let's go back to, so now if say a jewelry manufacturer wants to be Fairmined licensed, what's involved in that?
So there are different ways to involve depending on the type of factor that we are talking about. So we've been talking about the mining organizations who get certified. And then we have the suppliers and manufacturers. We have 2 types of suppliers in this arena. So we have first the refiners, who are the first buyer who purchases directly from the mine and refine it, clean the gold, and they are the only ones allowed to do this. And then we have the manufacturers who buy the gold, and usually the first authorized buyer is the one who's going to be paying the price, but this will impact the price of gold throughout the supply chain until the final consumer. And then we have the manufacturers who also go through an authorization process, and for both of these, it means that they are the ones allowed to sell Fairmined golds, and if they are not authorized, they could not sell Fairmined gold. And so on our website, fairmined.org, we do have the list of authorized suppliers, and it's available, it's public and available for everyone to be able to see who are those authorized suppliers. And then with the brands, they go through a licensing process, and this allows them to purchase the Fairmined gold and make claims about its usage, and source it with the different models that we have available for them.
So a couple clarifying questions, because I know this confuses people frequently. So the first is, if a manufacturer is certifying and licensing to be a supplier of Fairmined, you're not saying that a certain percentage of everything they make has to be Fairmined. You're just saying that what they claim to be Fairmined has been segregated and is only Fairmined. Is that correct?
Yes, and let me give you an example of a manufacturer we have here. I'm here with Riva Precision, and they do carry some of, they carry findings, are the only authorized supplier that is carrying findings here in the U.S.
Fairmined findings.
Fairmined findings, exactly. And so they 100% of the gold that is in this 14K or 18K findings is Fairmined gold. It is completely segregated in this case for them to be able to claim that this is. So you have the warranty, and they are audited also annually, and the first time it's annually, and then it's every 3 years depending on the outcomes of those audits. But any brand that wants to go and purchase from them can have that assurance, because they are members of Fairmined, that they are being audited, and that these pieces are in fact made with Fairmined gold. And in many cases, they are able to track the mines that it comes from.
So Laura just mentioned that's Riva Precision Manufacturing. They also have Fairmined Chain. And they are here at MJSA Expo, so you can visit them and learn more about that offering. So now say a designer or a brand wants to go to one of your manufacturers and use their Fairmined findings or grain, whatever they're selling, in their line. What do they have to do to license as Fairmined?
The licensing process is fairly simple, and it can take as long as the brand can as long as if a brand is ready to start working with Fairmined right away and has figured out the way to include this into their supply chain, they could do it within days or weeks. To complete the licensing process, which is very simple, they contact us directly, then they complete a formulary, understand all of the requirements that come in. If they want to do products that are claiming that they're Fairmined, well, this has to be completely traceable, segregated from the other sources of gold if they are continuing to use other sources of gold. And then they pay the administration fee, annual administration fee, which is very low, $60.
$60, okay. So you buy Fairmined gold, you segregate it, and so that you can claim which pieces of jewelry are made with this, and you pay $60 US for a license. I just can never get over how inexpensive that is.
It is. And then after paying the administrative fee, they get their license. And with this, they get access to the Fairmined Connect platform, where all of the purchases between members of the Fairmined initiative are recorded. Usually your supplier will record the purchases you made, and as a brand you just have to confirm that this is in fact what you purchased and what you received.
And when you've done that, you can then put Fairmined on your website, for instance. You can make Fairmined claims because you went through the licensing process.
Exactly, and they receive a very complete guide of marketing and how to be able to use the Fairmined brand, and how and in which cases they can hallmark their pieces with the Fairmined stamp. And this depends, of course, on the location they are and the local regulations. But they also receive examples of the certificates that they can issue with pieces made with Fairmined, and also the claims that they are allowed to make.
And I think where people get confused is, now if a brand or a designer simply wanted to buy Fairmined findings, for instance, and make jewelry using Fairmined gold, but not make Fairmined claims. They don't want to put Fairmined on the website. They're not going to claim this jewelry is Fairmined. They just want to buy those sources. They can.
Yes, they can. And, well, we do recommend just to have the control of it, to be members of the initiative in any case. If you don't want to put the stamp on your pieces, you don't have to. It's not mandatory to do so. But it's an added value to be able to make claims and relate this with the stories of origin that are behind a piece made with Fairmined gold.
So now what about a retailer? If a retailer buys Fairmined jewelry, can they say it's Fairmined? Can they get a license? Can they make any claims? How does this happen at the retail point?
Well, that has been a conversation that we're having, and we're very interested in involving more and more the retailing sector into the Fairmined initiative, because the sector has shown that interest. As of this point, they do not get a license or something because there's no risk of combining this or losing the traceability of the piece with the retailers.
So it's fully traceable. Once it arrives at the retailers, you know its whole chain of custody.
Exactly. And whatever brand they are purchasing these pieces from, those are the ones that should be Fairmined licensees, right? So if you're purchasing from the Fairmined licensees and they are making claims on a product level, the retail can show those claims and make those claims on the product description, for example.
So they can say, here's ring A from a manufacturer, and they may not talk about the sources at all. Here's ring B from a Fairmined brand, and this is what Fairmind's about. So they can talk about Fairmined and the claims that the brand makes, but they can't say, we're a Fairmined store.
Exactly. And we have some examples of that, and of retailers who do purchase Fairmined pieces. We have Robert Goodman, for example, or Greenwich Jewelers, who are also a licensed brand. So, for example, they can carry their own brand, make claims about that brand.
A store brand.
Exactly. That brand being, and then they can carry also another licensed brand and make claims on a product level for that brand. But in the counter, they just have a different brand that is not using Fairmined, and there's no issue with that.
Okay. So hopefully that clarifies what it takes to become Fairmined. So now I want to get to your exciting announcements, because one of the big challenges is doing enough remediation at enough mines to get enough volume of Fairmined gold to market that there's enough for everybody who wants to use it. And that's challenging, isn't it? It costs a lot of money.
It does, and also the challenges that some mining organizations face to be able to get to international gold market. And so this project that we are working with, it's meant to be a more scalable model than fully traceable model, and give that opportunity for brands that have, especially bigger and medium brands who have very complicated supply chains and big barriers to physically use the Fairmined gold.
So let's talk about this new program.
It's called the Fairmined credits, and each Fairmined credit is equivalent to a gram of gold that is being mined under the Fairmined certification. But it's decoupled from the physical use of Fairmined gold. In this case, we are decoupling the premium that is being paid from using it physically.
So it's kind of like a carbon credit or a carbon offset, correct?
Yes, that's a way that I like to use to describe it. Just as sometimes we use the carbon offset to
Oh, when I was flying to Italy, I was working in Italy, so I was flying back and forth every single month. And yes, I bought carbon offset credits just to like assuage my guilt, I guess, over how much resource I was using to be on those planes all the time.
Exactly. So this is offsetting for the social impact that should be made, and so that the brands can make sure the responsibly sourced Fairmined gold is being extracted, and that mining organizations that in an alternative way wouldn't be getting any premium for this are getting it and are able to still be taking part in the Fairmined initiative.
So a brand that wants to buy Fairmined credits, those credits go to the mines, so the mines can keep improving so they can produce the volume that we need, or we can bring more mines online, and the brand can make Fairmined claims because they're buying the credits?
Yes, so the mine is able to sell, and that's the only requirement, that they are selling this gold legally and in most cases locally because of opportunity. And sometimes that buyer is not going to be a Fairmined member, so they are not receiving a price for that gold. So the idea is that the mining organization will bring to the Alliance for Responsible Mining their invoices for them, or in many cases these are not invoices, but the legal record that they have of these sales, so that we can have a record of the annual non-Fairmined sales that they made, and turn this into the Fairmined credits availability. So the idea is to have like a deposit of Fairmined credits, that then when a brand approaches us and wants to purchase Fairmined credits, we can show them for each of the mining organizations how many credits are available. And for example, if a brand wants to do a full collection with a different source of gold, and for this they require 5 kilos of gold or something like that, they can choose to offset that by purchasing the equivalent to 5 kilos of Fairmined credits and paying that in credits. So they can choose the mining organizations they would like to give these credits to, and look at the programs that the mining organizations would be implementing with this premium.
And I think sometimes people don't realize that there are times when a brand wants 5 kilos of gold and there's just not 5 kilos of Fairmined gold available. So we have to get money out to those mines to get them to the Fairmined part. I'll tell you how I'm picturing it, and you tell me if I'm picturing it correctly. At the very high end of the responsibility spectrum, we have certifications. So these are very sophisticated mines with infrastructure and administration, and we can actually go full certification there. And then about halfway down from there, we've got Fairmined, which is a craft code and a standard, and we've moved them towards certifications. We either have local or government or some kind of, or just size and economics barriers to getting to full certification. So there's the Fairmined standard. And I picture you introducing the credits program sort of down here. It's not as good as craft code, but until we can get enough money and enough resources to these mines to get more mines to the Fairmined standard, it actually provides the funding to move more people up to Fairmined.
Well, kind of. I would describe Fairmined and even the credits as the full certification level. And then craft code would be pre-certified.
Okay.
At this point, what we're thinking with the credits is that it's going to be directed to the certified mines that have challenges to get to the local market, or had the opportunity to sell first by selling locally outside of the Fairmined initiative. But this gold that they're selling is still complying fully with the standard.
Okay.
And so in the future, that would be amazing that some of these credits could go also to pre-certified mines and support their transformation to becoming certified. So that's, but we're at the pilot stages of the Fairmined credits and just starting to put the buzz out there and talk about what we can do with this and see which actors of the industry could be interested in this. And now that you mentioned the retailing sector, I believe it's a great opportunity to use the Fairmined credits and to make retailers part of the Fairmined initiative.
So they could make claims then if they bought credits?
They could make claims even on a product level. If the pieces are the offset is 100% of the weight of the gold of the pieces and collections they carry. But they could use this with a collection that uses any source of gold, different than Fairmined. But it is an opportunity for them to offer it directly to their customers as an option, for example, or just if they want to do some of their capsule collections, using these Fairmined credits in a specific collection, for example.
So in the credits program, the first problem you're trying to resolve, and this is another thing I don't think a lot of people realize, it's really hard to move precious metals around the world. Getting precious metals from one country into another country's marketplace legally is complicated and expensive, and that's why most jewelry manufacturers will source their gold in market wherever they are, because it's not just the weight of it moving it around, but all of the tariffs and legislation around moving gold. So it sounds like that's the first problem you're solving. Let them sell the good gold locally, but let other people get the Fairmined participation out of it.
And allow them to receive the premium still. And yes, as you were saying, getting the metal is very expensive, and we're talking about getting the certified gold that requires that segregation and the warranties of traceability throughout the supply chain. That also comes at a cost. If we're talking about smaller amounts of gold with the economies of scale, well, it will be more expensive to be able to get to a country that is getting Fairmined for the first time. This might be a lot more expensive than a country that has 100 different license brands. It's going to be a lot cheaper for them to get it because of the cost of segregation for the supplier who's bringing it in. So the idea is also that smaller designers have a lot more control on their supply chain and on their production processes. Bigger and medium brands do not have this control, and in a different industry, for example, in the technology industry, in the pieces that they're using gold, they have a lot less control because this is large amounts that are produced aboard, and it's just a very small piece of their production. So getting the Fairmined out there is very difficult, but getting the credits would be something more possible for these industries too, and for bigger jewelry brands.
So if somebody's buying 5 kilos of gold, in your earlier example, to do their line, then they can buy the Fairmined credit offsets for 5 kilos of value. Those premiums go to the miners, and it continues to invest in that Fairmined ecosystem, which will allow you to continue to grow.
Exactly. And right now, the pilots we are working with, they are with the mines that we have certified right now. And it's possible for them to get physically the gold out into the international gold market. But this is an opportunity for countries that have really big barriers for the miners to get their gold outside. So it is a possibility for mining organizations that are looking to the Fairmined initiative and wanting to become part of it, but have really big barriers. In those cases, their whole production could have that offset of the premium.
I think this is such an innovative approach you're taking. And I know people argue, people, game carbon offsets. There can be lots of discussion about whether carbon offsets are good or bad, but to me, and I think if you participated in our gem discussion on Sunday, I don't know what day it is anymore, or our metal discussion, our recycled metal discussion yesterday, acknowledging that these are complex, messy problems, and that incremental change is what's available to us, so let's take the incremental change. We can't let perfection be the enemy of progress.
Exactly, and what we have done so far is very linked to traceability. And this is very easy to understand for the final consumer, for the jewelers, for everyone. But it's the bigger impact if we get to scale it with, it still makes the same impact that the premium does. It still gets to transform more mining organizations. So we're doing this, and it can be very controversial because traceability is what we understand and what we have done for a long time. And so there's a lot of value in this, and having the credits doesn't mean that traceability is losing its value. It's still a very important part of it. We have brands that are based solely on using traceable and ecological gold. For example, mercury-free production using mercury-free gold is a value proposition of some of the brands, and that is very valuable. So it's just an opportunity for those that have bigger challenges and barriers to be able to also make a positive impact in their supply chain and reduce some of the costs that come with that segregation.
And then that funding should help you bring more volume online into market over time, right?
That's it. That's exactly it. And also they are making sure that cleaner gold and responsibly mined gold with following the guidelines of the Fairmined standard is being mined and not just, these mining organizations are being able to be legalized and follow the rules.
That's very exciting. It's very exciting to me that retailers could actually participate in these Fairmined claims, because that's our last step before the consumer. So if we're only talking about making these changes, deep in the supply chain from mining to manufacturing, it's important, it's good. When we take it to the brand and we can make claims at the brand level, that's better. But when the retailers embrace this and start having these conversations with the consumers, these are better stories to tell.
Definitely, and it's very important for us to be able to have that contact with the final customer. We have a lot of contact with businesses, but we are not facing directly the people who are buying it and listening to the story and being able to see firsthand what's the impact that the emotional purchase that a person is making of their own rings, their own pieces that they want to give to their loved ones, their daughters, has, the question that they're making and how their decision process can be modified by understanding the impact that this is making in the mining communities. And not just retailers, we see like a sea of opportunity, as I was mentioning, in the technology industry. Fairmined credits are the first time that we have been able to work with a technology company, and that's the pilot that we launched in December for the Fairmined credits.
That's a very big deal. I sat on a panel with the head of sourcing for Apple, I don't know, like 7 years ago. And they were talking about how critical it was to them to get to responsible gold and how it was next to impossible at the volumes they needed to buy and the markets they needed to buy it at. So I know that, there's gold in so many of the products that we use. It's in our phones, it's in our computers, so that makes great opportunity for them to help contribute to this as well.
Exactly, and also for brands, and I can think of suppliers that are working with different sources of gold and trying to reduce their carbon footprint and offer something that is more local and that doesn't signify having to take the gold all the way from Colombia, someplace else. They can offset that and add to the social responsibility policies of the brands they're working with. They could offer this offset of the Fairmined, and add that social component and to their environmental policies, because so far they should be just environmental.
That's very cool. So, this is an exciting announcement. Are the credits available now for purchase, or is it still in a pilot stage?
It is in a pilot stage, but we are looking for different actors and different brands to join, and we have credits available right now from last year in some of the mining organizations. And so yes, this is like the experimental part of it, but we are very thrilled and excited of things that are happening, brands that are contacting us about wanting to use this, brands that have historically for the past few years wanted to start working with Fairmined and hadn't had the chance because of the complexity of their supply chains. And so this is an opportunity. We're also looking into having that conversation with many retailers that could start doing the first pilot with the Fairmined credits.
So where should people keep an eye to learn more about this? Is it at fairmined.org?
Yes, at Fairmined, and if they want to have more information, if they're interested in, just contact us directly. My email is lauragalvez@responsibleminds.org, and I can provide more information about how to start working on a project and apply the project with the Fairmined credits.
Very good. Well, I think we're about out of time for today, so we covered it all, though. Any parting words of wisdom you have for our audience about how to incorporate Fairmined or the benefits that they'll see, or any particular ask?
Just, start questioning your sourcing in general. That's a more important thing. Start questioning where it comes from. Ask the right questions to your suppliers. And that's how we, just with a small question, we can start to generate some change. So that's a more important thing. And if it comes natural to you, start using Fairmined in your products.
Good advice. Start asking the questions. Okay, well, that is a wrap for our session. Thank you so much for taking time to share all this information with all of our membership and community. And this is also a wrap for Live from MJSA Expo. This is our last session for 2023. So we will have all of the replays up for you at the MJSA website and on the MJSA YouTube channel sometime in the next week, once we get back and repackage them. If you had any any difficulties with audio or bandwidth during the live streams, we'll be actually posting the full video versions. So if you missed anything or weren't able to quite hear something, the final postings will be the not live streamed, but the actual video ones. And I think that's it. Thanks for joining us this year. MJSA Expo is still open till 1 p.m. today, so get to the floor. I'm sorry, MJSA Expo is still open till 2 p.m. today, but my Central Time calendar doesn't say that. So you've got till 2 p.m. today to get to the show floor and meet your manufacturing partners and find some new ones. So thanks, everybody. Have a good one.